The mop hit the floor with the same rhythmic precision it had for the past 18 months. But tonight everything would change when Staff Sergeant Williams looked down at the ID badge clipped to her utility belt and went completely silent for the first time in his decorated career. The Tactical Operations Center at Fort Braxton hummed with the constant buzz of encrypted communications, satellite feeds, and the low murmur of personnel coordinating missions across 3 time zones. Banks of monitors cast blue light across faces of analysts and coordinators who worked through the night, their fingers dancing across keyboards as they tracked assets and threats in real time. The smell of strong coffee mixed with the metallic tang of electronic equipment and industrial cleaning solution, creating an atmosphere that was both sterile and alive with purpose. Maria Elena Vasquez moved through this world like a shadow, her industrial mop bucket rolling silently across polished linoleum floors as she navigated between workstations and briefing areas. At 34, she was compact and efficient in her movements, standing barely 5'4" in her standard-issue custodial uniform. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore the same expression of quiet focus that had characterized her approach to every task for as long as anyone could remember. The other cleaning staff had nicknamed her the Ghost because she seemed to appear and disappear without anyone noticing, always managing to clean around the most sensitive operations without disturbing the flow of work. The security badge dangling from her belt identified her simply as M. Vasquez, Custodial Services, Level 2 clearance. To the dozens of military personnel who passed her each night, she was invisible infrastructure, as essential and unremarkable as the ventilation system or emergency lighting. They would glance up briefly when she approached their workstations, offering polite nods before returning to their classified briefings and tactical planning sessions. Some of the younger soldiers would pause their conversations when she drew near, careful not to discuss sensitive information in front of civilian support staff, but most had grown so accustomed to her presence that they continued their work. As if she wasn't there at all. Maria had perfected the art of being overlooked. She moved with deliberate efficiency, cleaning around classified documents without appearing to read them, emptying trash bins without seeming to notice the contents, and maintaining the spotless environment that allowed the Tactical Operations Center to function at peak performance. Her supervisors in the Facilities Management Department praised her reliability and discretion. She never missed a shift, never complained about difficult assignments, and had never been cited for a security violation in her year and a half of service. The personnel files and human resources contained glowing recommendations from her immediate supervisors, though few bothered to read beyond her basic qualifications and clearance level. But Maria Elena Vasquez carried herself with a bearing that didn't quite match her job description. Her posture was too straight, her awareness too sharp, her movements too precise for someone whose primary responsibility was floor maintenance. When she cleaned around the communications equipment, her eyes would linger for just a moment on tactical displays, reading terrain maps and unit positions with the kind of fluency that came from extensive field experience. During briefings about overseas operations, she would slow her work pace almost imperceptibly, absorbing details about supply chains, extraction routes, and enemy capabilities with the focused attention of someone who understood the life and death importance of such information. The overnight shift suited her perfectly. The Tactical Operations Center was quieter after midnight, staffed primarily by essential personnel monitoring ongoing operations and maintaining communication with deployed units. The reduced activity meant fewer interruptions to her work routine, and the cover of darkness outside seemed to match her preference for operating in the shadows. Colonel Richardson, the night watch commander, had grown accustomed to her silent presence during his briefings. He would occasionally glance in her direction when discussing particularly sensitive information, but her consistent discretion and security clearance had earned his trust over the months of shared night shifts. Maria's efficiency in her custodial duties was remarkable, though no one thought to question how someone with no apparent military background could navigate the complex security protocols and restricted areas of the Tactical Operations Center with such ease. She seemed to instinctively understand which areas required deeper cleaning after particularly intense planning sessions, when to delay her work to avoid interfering with time-sensitive communications, and how to maintain the sterile environment necessary for classified operations. Her supply requests were always precise, her scheduling was flawless, and she never seemed to require the guidance that other custodial staff needed when working in sensitive military environments. The few personal conversations she had with her colleagues revealed little about her background. She spoke with a slight accent that suggested Southwest origins, possibly New Mexico or Arizona, and mentioned having moved to North Carolina for family reasons. When pressed for details, she would smile politely and redirect the conversation to work-related topics. Her personnel file listed previous employment in commercial cleaning services, with references that checked out, but provided only basic confirmation of her reliability and work ethic. The background investigation required for her security clearance had been routine, revealing no red flags or areas of concern that would prevent her from accessing restricted areas of the base. Maria would sit alone in the staff break room, reading paperback novels or working on crossword puzzles with mechanical pencils that she kept sharp and organized. She never joined the casual conversations about weekend plans or family obligations that characterized the social interactions among the night shift personnel. Her locker contained only the basic items expected of any employee: spare uniform pieces, personal hygiene products, and a small lunch that she ate with the same quiet efficiency that characterized all her activities. The photograph of a young woman in graduation cap and gown that she kept on her locker shelf drew occasional glances from curious colleagues, but Maria never volunteered information about her personal life or family connections. The work itself seemed almost meditative. For her, she would begin each shift by reviewing the areas requiring attention, checking her supplies, and planning her route through the facility with the kind of systematic approach that maximized efficiency, while minimizing disruption to ongoing operations. Her mop strokes were precise and economical, covering maximum area with minimum effort. She cleaned each workstation thoroughly but quickly, always completing her tasks ahead of schedule, without appearing rushed or careless. The floors under her care maintained a consistent shine that reflected the overhead lighting and created an environment of professional cleanliness that supported the serious nature of the work conducted in the Tactical Operations Center. There were moments when Maria's true nature would surface in subtle ways that only the most observant might notice. When the emergency alert system activated during a particularly tense situation, involving a military convoy under attack overseas, she didn't freeze or seek shelter like most civilian staff would be expected to do. Instead, she continued her work with steady calm, positioning herself near the communication stations where she could monitor the unfolding situation without appearing to eavesdrop. Her body language remained relaxed and professional, but her attention was focused entirely on the tactical displays and radio communications that were coordinating the response to the crisis during equipment malfunctions or technical difficulties. That would typically confuse someone with no military background. Maria seemed to understand the implications immediately. When satellite communication links went down during a critical operation, she adjusted her cleaning schedule to stay clear of the technicians working to restore the connection, demonstrating an intuitive understanding of military communication protocols that went far beyond what her job required. Her questions about facility maintenance were always informed and relevant, suggesting familiarity with the complex systems that supported military operations. The most telling moments came during shift changes, when incoming personnel would receive briefings about ongoing operations and developing situations. Maria would time her cleaning activities to occur nearby, working with the same focused efficiency while absorbing information about troop movements, intelligence assessments, and strategic planning that revealed her deep understanding of military operations. She never asked questions or offered input, but her presence during these briefings felt natural rather than intrusive, as if she belonged in these discussions despite her civilian status and support role. Tonight was different, though. The atmosphere in the Tactical Operations Center carried an undercurrent of tension that Maria had learned to recognize from countless nights of observing military operations under stress. A joint special operations mission was being coordinated with multiple agencies and international partners, the kind of complex operation that required flawless communication and precise timing. The personnel staffing the overnight shift included some of the most experienced operators and analysts on the base, individuals whose expertise was called upon only for the most critical situations. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Maria had arrived for her shift at the usual time, but she could sense immediately that this would not be a routine night of facility maintenance and quiet observation. Base clock read 0100 hours when Maria began her systematic progression through Sector 7, the most classified wing of the Tactical Operations Center, where Joint Task Force commanders coordinated with international allies and special operations units deployed in active theaters. Her cart rolled with practice silence past workstations where Army Rangers communicated with Navy SEAL teams, where Air Force drone operators provided real-time surveillance feeds, and where CIA analysts decoded intercepted communications that could determine the success or failure of missions involving American lives. Master Sergeant Thompson barely glanced up from his tactical display as Maria approached his workstation, her mop making careful patterns around the legs of his chair while he coordinated supply drops for a reconnaissance team operating behind enemy lines. The coffee stain near his keyboard had been there for 3 days, a reminder of the intensity that characterized operations in this sector. Maria had requested permission to clean it twice, but Thompson had waved her away each time, too focused on his mission parameters to allow even 30 seconds of interruption. Tonight, he seemed particularly absorbed in his communications, speaking in the clipped, efficient language that special operations personnel used, when every word could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophe. The hierarchy in the Tactical Operations Center was rigid and clearly defined, with Maria occupying the lowest rung of a ladder that stretched from her custodial duties up through the various ranks of enlisted personnel, non-commissioned officers, commissioned officers, and the senior leadership who made decisions that affected global security operations. Colonel Richardson commanded the night shift with quiet authority, his 23 years of military experience evident in the way younger officers saw his guidance during complex situations. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes supervised the International Coordination Desk, where she maintained communication with allied forces and ensured that joint operations proceeded according to carefully negotiated protocols. Major Santos oversaw the Intelligence Analysis section, where classified information from multiple sources was synthesized into actionable intelligence for field commanders. Below the officers, senior non-commissioned officers like Master Sergeant Thompson and Sergeant First Class Williams controlled the operational tempo, their expertise in communications, logistics, and tactical coordination essential to the smooth functioning of the facility. Specialist Martinez monitored satellite feeds from her bank of screens, her young face illuminated by the blue glow of real-time surveillance footage from 3 different continents. Corporal Jackson maintained the secure communication links that connected Fort Braxton to deployed units, embassy security teams, and intelligence assets operating in hostile territories around the world. And at the bottom of this military hierarchy was Maria, invisible in her utility uniform, moving through their world with the same respect and attention that they might give to the ventilation system, or the emergency lighting. Her security clearance allowed her access to these restricted areas, but her civilian status and support role meant that she existed in the margins of their professional awareness. When she cleaned around Specialist Martinez's workstation, young soldier would pause her analysis of drone footage, waiting for the custodial work to be completed before resuming her examination of potential threats to American forces. The pause was polite, but clearly indicated that Maria's presence was a temporary interruption to more important work. The routine had become so familiar that Maria could navigate the entire Tactical Operations Center with her eyes closed. She knew that Major Santos preferred his coffee cups removed immediately after briefings, but that Lieutenant Colonel Hayes liked to keep her empty cup visible as a reminder of how long she had been working on particularly challenging problems. Master Sergeant Thompson's workstation required careful attention because he had a habit of leaving classified documents face down on his desk, trusting that the custodial staff understood the sensitivity of the material without requiring explicit reminders. Sergeant First Class Williams kept his area meticulously organized, but he generated enormous amounts of paper waste from the continuous printing of intelligence reports and operational updates that required immediate secure disposal. The work itself was repetitive in ways that might have driven other people to distraction, but Maria found comfort in the predictable rhythms of maintenance and cleaning. Each shift began with the same systematic inventory of supplies, the same careful inspection of equipment, the same methodical progression through designated areas according to a schedule that balanced efficiency with security requirements. She would begin in the less sensitive areas where administrative personnel handled logistics and personnel matters, working her way gradually toward the high-security sectors where the most classified operations were coordinated. The progression allowed her to gauge the general tempo of operations for the night, understanding which areas would require more attention and which could be cleaned quickly, to allow more time for the complex work in restricted sections. Her mop bucket contained the same industrial-grade cleaning solutions that she had used for 18 months, chemicals specifically approved for use in facilities handling classified materials. The smell of disinfectant and floor cleaner had become so familiar that she barely noticed it anymore, though visitors to the facility often commented on the sterile, professional atmosphere that her work helped maintain. Her cart was loaded with microfiber cloths for cleaning computer screens and sensitive equipment, paper towels for general cleaning tasks, and specialized products for maintaining the various surfaces and materials that comprise the high-tech environment of the Tactical Operations Center. The floors themselves told stories that Maria had learned to read like a tactical map. Heavy foot traffic around the Crisis Management Center indicated ongoing operations that required immediate attention from senior leadership. Coffee stains and food debris near workstations suggested personnel who were working extended shifts on time-sensitive missions. The pattern of dirt and wear around communication equipment revealed which systems were being used most heavily, often correlating with international developments that were commanding the attention of American military planners. But the most telling indicator of operational tempo was the trash that accumulated around workstations during intense periods of activity. Crumpled intelligence reports that had been superseded by more recent information, empty energy drink cans that sustained personnel through all-night operations, and hastily discarded food packaging from meals eaten at workstations rather than in the dining facility, all painted a picture of military professionals operating under extreme pressure to accomplish mission-critical tasks. Maria's responsibility for securing and disposing of this waste meant that she was often among the first to recognize when situations were escalating toward crisis levels. The secure shredding procedures alone required nearly an hour of her 8-hour shift, as every piece of paper that had been in contact with classified information needed to be destroyed according to strict protocols. She would separate documents by classification level, feed them through industrial shredders that reduce them to particles small enough to prevent any possibility of reconstruction, and then ensure that the resulting waste was collected by specialized disposal services that maintained the chain of custody required for materials that had once contained state secrets. The process was tedious and time-consuming, but Maria understood that these seemingly mundane procedures were essential to maintaining the security that allowed the Tactical Operations Center to function effectively. Her interaction with the military personnel was limited to the brief exchanges necessary for her work, conversations that rarely extended beyond requests for access to specific areas or confirmations that her cleaning activities would not interfere with ongoing operations. Major Santos would nod approvingly when Maria finished cleaning the intelligence analysis section, sometimes offering a quiet "thank you" that acknowledged her efficiency without suggesting any deeper professional relationship. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes might pause her work to ensure that Maria could clean around her workstation safely, making small talk about the weather or base facilities that maintained social courtesy without crossing the boundaries that separated their respective roles. The younger enlisted personnel were more likely to engage in casual conversation, though these interactions typically revealed the vast gulf between their military experiences and Maria's apparent civilian background. Specialist Martinez would sometimes comment on news events or popular culture during slow periods, conversations that Maria would navigate with polite interest while carefully avoiding topics that might reveal knowledge inconsistent with her supposed background in commercial cleaning services. Corporal Jackson occasionally asked about her family or personal life, questions that Maria would answer with the kind of generic responses that satisfied curiosity without providing meaningful information about her past or current circumstances. The physical demands of the work were significant, requiring Maria to lift heavy equipment, work in cramped spaces, and maintain productivity throughout 8-hour shifts that often involved continuous movement and repetitive motions. Her compact frame was well suited to the job, allowing her to clean around bulky communication equipment and navigate the narrow spaces between workstations that larger individuals might find challenging. But the work also demanded mental stamina, as the constant exposure to classified information and high-stress military operations required unwavering discretion and professional composure during equipment malfunctions or technical emergencies. Maria's role became even more invisible as military personnel focused entirely on resolving problems that could affect operational capabilities. She would continue her work around crisis management activities, adjusting her schedule to avoid interfering with repair technicians or emergency response procedures while ensuring that the facility maintained the cleanliness standards necessary for sensitive electronic equipment. These situations revealed the sharp contrast between the high-stakes nature of the work conducted around her and the seemingly mundane nature of her own responsibilities. The break-room conversations among custodial staff reflected the disconnect between their support roles and the military mission they served. Her colleagues would discuss television shows, family obligations, and personal financial concerns with the same casual attitude that characterized any civilian workplace, seemingly unaware that their work directly supported operations that could determine the outcome of international conflicts or the safety of American military personnel deployed in dangerous situations around the world. The first indication that Maria Vasquez was more than she appeared came during a classified briefing about hostage rescue operations in Eastern Europe, when Lieutenant Colonel Hayes mentioned the tactical challenges of operating in mountainous terrain at high altitude. Maria's mop paused for exactly 3 seconds, a brief hesitation that coincided with her dark eyes focusing on the topographical maps displayed across the main screen. Her expression remained neutral, but something in her posture shifted almost imperceptibly, the kind of subtle physical change that trained observers might recognize as the involuntary response of someone who had personal experience with the tactical problems being discussed. Colonel Richardson was reviewing extraction Roots with his senior staff when Maria approached to empty the wastebasket near the main briefing table. As she worked, Richardson described the difficulties of coordinating helicopter support in terrain where radio communication was unreliable and weather conditions could change without warning. Maria's movements remained steady and professional, but her breathing pattern altered slightly, becoming more controlled and deliberate. When Richardson mentioned the specific altitude challenges that affected helicopter performance in thin air, Maria's grip on her mop handle tightened fractionally. The kind of unconscious physical response that suggested intimate familiarity with the life and death realities of high-altitude military operations. The personnel files in human resources contained standard employment documentation that supported Maria's civilian background, but they also included medical records that raised questions for anyone who bothered to examine them closely. Her physical fitness evaluations showed cardiovascular conditioning and muscular development that exceeded what would be expected from someone whose primary work experience involved commercial cleaning services. The vaccination records in her file included immunizations for tropical diseases and biological agents that were typically required only for military personnel deploying to hostile environments. Her emergency contact information listed a phone number with a Colorado area code, connecting her to a region known primarily for military training facilities and defense contractors. During her lunch break, Maria would sit alone in the staff dining area, reading newspapers with the kind of focused attention that suggested professional interest rather than casual curiosity. Her reading habits revealed knowledge gaps that seemed inconsistent with her apparent background. She would skip entertainment and lifestyle sections entirely, focusing instead on international news, defense spending reports, and analysis of global security issues. When articles discussed military operations or defense policy decisions, her reading pace would slow dramatically, and she would occasionally make small notations in the margins using the same mechanical pencil that she kept sharp and readily accessible throughout her shift. The most revealing moments occurred during emergency situations that tested the crisis management capabilities of the Tactical Operations Center. When communication links failed during a time-sensitive operation involving American forces under fire in Afghanistan, Maria's reaction was markedly different from other civilian staff members. While the facility's management personnel gathered nervously near the exits, awaiting instructions from security staff, Maria continued her work with steady composure, positioning herself where she could observe the technical repair efforts without interfering. Her body language suggested familiarity with communication equipment, failures, and confidence in the ability of military personnel to resolve technical problems under pressure. Her understanding of military protocols extended beyond what could be explained by 18 months of observation and casual interaction with personnel. When visiting officers arrived for briefings about joint operations with international allies, Maria would adjust her cleaning schedule automatically to ensure that sensitive areas were pristine before these high-level meetings. Her timing was consistently perfect, suggesting knowledge of military etiquette and protocol requirements that went far beyond basic job training. She seemed to understand intuitively which visitors required enhanced security measures, which meetings demanded absolute confidentiality, and which operations were sensitive enough to require modified custodial procedures. The supply requests that Maria submitted to facilities management demonstrated unusual expertise in selecting cleaning products and maintenance materials appropriate for sensitive electronic equipment and classified document handling. Her specifications were precise and technically accurate, calling for anti-static cleaning solutions, electromagnetic interference-resistant materials, and specialized disposal containers that met security requirements for classified waste. When questioned about these detailed requirements, she would explain that she had received training in proper procedures for working in secure facilities, but her knowledge clearly extended beyond standard custodial training programs during shift. Changes when day and night personnel overlapped briefly to transfer responsibility for ongoing operations. Maria would modify her work patterns to accommodate the complex logistics of classified briefings and secure communications. She understood without being told that certain types of information could not be discussed in the presence of personnel who lacked appropriate clearances, and she would time her cleaning activities to minimize her presence during the most sensitive portions of operational briefings. Her ability to navigate these security requirements suggested training, an experience that went far beyond what would be expected from civilian support staff. The most intriguing evidence of Maria's hidden background appeared in her interactions with military equipment and technology. When technical problems arose with computer systems or communication equipment, she would observe the troubleshooting efforts with the focused attention of someone who understood the underlying systems and their operational importance. During a particularly complex failure of satellite communication links, Maria was observed studying the diagnostic displays with obvious comprehension, her eyes tracking data streams and error messages with the fluency of someone who had extensive experience with military communication protocols. Her personal belongings, while carefully limited to items appropriate for her civilian cover, occasionally revealed inconsistencies that suggested a more complex background. The mechanical pencils that she preferred were military-issue items, designed for reliability in harsh environmental conditions and favored by personnel who needed to maintain accurate records under challenging circumstances. Her watch was a ruggedized model typically worn by military personnel deployed in combat zones, though it could conceivably be explained as a personal preference for durable timepieces. The small notebook that she carried for work-related notes was filled with precise handwriting that included abbreviations and terminology more commonly associated with military operations than facilities management. Most tellingly, Maria's situational awareness far exceeded what would be expected from someone with purely civilian experience. She seemed to monitor multiple conversations simultaneously while performing her custodial duties, absorbing information about personnel movements, operational schedules, and security procedures with the systematic attention of someone trained in intelligence gathering. Her position of strategic insignificance allowed her to observe classified operations without drawing attention, but her level of comprehension suggested that she was processing this information with professional expertise rather than casual curiosity. The medical supplies in her personal first aid kit included items that were uncommon among civilian personnel but standard for military medics and combat-trained soldiers. Her knowledge of basic emergency medical procedures became apparent during a minor accident when Specialist Martinez cut her hand on broken glass from a coffee cup. Maria's response was immediate and professional, providing appropriate first aid with the confidence and competence of someone who had extensive training in emergency medical care. Her treatment of the wound followed military field protocols, and her calm efficiency under pressure suggested experience with more serious medical emergencies than would typically be encountered in civilian employment. During rare moments when the Tactical Operations Center was quiet enough for casual conversation, Maria would occasionally make observations about international affairs or military policy that revealed depth of knowledge inconsistent with her supposed background in commercial cleaning services. When younger personnel discussed current events or military news, Maria would listen with obvious interest, but contribute only generic comments that avoided revealing her true level of understanding. However, her questions were invariably sophisticated and relevant, suggesting familiarity with the strategic and tactical implications of the issues being discussed. The most compelling evidence of Maria's hidden military background came from her instinctive responses to emergency alerts and security procedures. During periodic drills that tested the facility's response to various threat scenarios, Maria would react with immediate understanding of the appropriate procedures, moving to designated safe areas or continuing critical operations with the disciplined composure of someone who had extensive training in military emergency protocols. Her performance during these exercises was flawless, but her familiarity with complex security procedures suggested experience that went far beyond standard civilian. Employee orientation. Her understanding of operational security measures was particularly revealing. Maria seemed to recognize classified information intuitively, adjusting her behavior and work patterns to maintain appropriate security without requiring explicit guidance from military personnel. She understood which conversations needed to be interrupted by her presence, which documents required special handling procedures, and which areas demanded enhanced security measures during specific types of operations. This level of security awareness typically required extensive training and practical experience in handling classified materials and supporting military operations. The personal photographs that Maria kept in her locker included images that raised questions about her civilian background. One photograph showed her standing next to a military helicopter in what appeared to be a desert environment, though her face was partially obscured by sunglasses and a baseball cap that made positive identification difficult. Another image depicted her with a group of individuals wearing military-style clothing in an outdoor setting that resembled training facilities used by special operations units. These photographs could potentially be explained as family connections or civilian employment at military facilities, but they suggested associations that extended beyond her current role as custodial staff. The most significant indication of Maria's true background was her reaction to specific types of military communications and operational updates. When radio traffic included references to special operations units, hostage rescue missions, or counter-terrorism activities, Maria's attention would focus with laser-like intensity, though she would continue her work with the same professional efficiency that characterized all her activities. Her body language during these moments suggested not just interest but personal investment in the success of these operations, the kind of emotional connection that typically developed only through direct participation in similar missions. Tonight, as Maria worked through her routine maintenance tasks while the Tactical Operations Center coordinated a complex joint operation involving multiple special operations units, her hidden expertise was about to be tested in ways that would forever change her carefully maintained anonymity. The crisis began at 0347 hours with a burst of static across the secure communication channels linking Fort Braxton to operation. Nightfall, a joint special operations mission unfolding in the mountains of Eastern Europe. Maria was completing her cleaning routine in Sector 5 when the first indication of trouble crackled through the radio speakers mounted throughout the Tactical Operations Center. The voice of Staff Sergeant Williams, call sign Bravo 6, came through fragmented and distorted, his normally calm professional tone edged with urgency that immediately commanded the attention of every person in the facility. Base, this is Bravo 6. Heavy contact. Coordinates compromised. Requesting immediate ... lost visual on. The transmission cut to electronic silence that filled the operations center with the kind of tension that preceded either miraculous saves or devastating losses. Colonel Richardson moved to the main communication console with the quick, purposeful stride of an officer who had managed countless crisis situations throughout his career. His hands moved across the control panel with practiced efficiency, attempting to re-establish contact with the 12-man special operations team that had been inserted into hostile territory 72 hours earlier. The mission parameters were classified at the highest levels, but the urgency in Richardson's voice when he called for his senior staff suggested that American lives hung in the balance of decisions that would be made in the next few minutes. Williams, this is Base Actual, please respond, Richardson transmitted, his voice carrying the calm authority that special operations personnel relied upon during moments when panic could mean death. The silence that followed stretched for 30 seconds, then 60, then stretched beyond the point where technical difficulties could explain the communication failure. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes moved to a secondary communication system, her fingers dancing across digital interfaces as she attempted to establish contact through backup channels and satellite relays that should have provided redundant communication capabilities. Maria continued her work with the same steady professionalism that had characterized her performance for 18 months, but her attention was focused entirely on the unfolding crisis. She positioned her cart near the main communication station, where she could observe the increasingly frantic efforts of military personnel to re-establish contact with their deployed team. Her movements remained purposeful and efficient, but her dark eyes absorbed every detail of the communication procedures, technical diagnostics, and emergency protocols that the operations center implemented in response to the crisis. Major Santos coordinated with intelligence assets to determine whether the communication failure resulted from technical problems or enemy action that had compromised the special operations team. The intelligence picture was fragmentary and contradictory, with satellite imagery showing normal activity in the target area but electronic intelligence suggesting possible jamming of communication frequencies. The uncertainty created a decision-making nightmare for military leaders who needed accurate information to coordinate rescue operations or tactical support for personnel who might be fighting for their lives in hostile territory. The technical difficulties multiplied rapidly as military communication specialists discovered that the problem extended beyond simple radio failure. The sophisticated satellite communication systems that provided backup capabilities were experiencing systematic interference that suggested deliberate jamming by hostile forces, equipped with advanced electronic warfare capabilities. The GPS navigation systems that should have provided precise location data for the missing team were showing conflicting information that made it impossible to determine their exact position or status. Sergeant First Class Williams arrived within minutes of the initial crisis, summoned from his off-duty quarters by the emergency notification system that activated when Special Operations Forces encountered situations requiring immediate command attention. His expertise in military communications and electronic warfare made him the most qualified person on the base to diagnose and resolve the technical problems that were preventing contact with the deployed team. But as Williams ran diagnostic tests on the primary communication systems, his expression grew increasingly grim, suggesting that the problems were more complex and serious than standard technical failures. "Sir, we're dealing with coordinated electronic warfare," Williams reported to Colonel Richardson after completing his initial assessment of the communication failures. "Someone with sophisticated equipment is jamming multiple frequency bands simultaneously, using techniques that suggest military-grade electronic warfare capabilities. The interference patterns are too precise and coordinated to be natural phenomena or equipment malfunctions." The implications of Williams' assessment sent ripples of concern through the senior staff assembled in the operations center. If hostile forces were employing advanced electronic warfare against American special operations teams, it suggested either state-sponsored opposition or terrorist organizations with access to military-grade equipment that could neutralize the technological advantages upon which American forces depended for successful completion of sensitive missions. Maria observed the growing crisis with the focused attention of someone who understood the life-and-death implications of communication failures during special operations. Her cleaning activities brought her within listening distance of technical discussions between Williams and the communication specialists who were attempting to identify alternative methods of contacting the missing team. The complexity of the electronic warfare environment was beyond the capabilities of standard military communication equipment, creating a tactical problem that demanded innovative solutions and specialized expertise. The situation deteriorated further when attempts to establish communication through alternative channels revealed that the electronic jamming was following a sophisticated pattern that suggested detailed knowledge of American military communication protocols. The hostile forces were not simply broadcasting interference across wide frequency bands, but were instead employing targeted jamming that specifically countered the backup systems and emergency frequencies that special operations teams used when primary communication channels failed. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes coordinated with allied forces in the region to determine whether other military units were experiencing similar communication difficulties, but the reports were inconsistent and confusing. Some allied units reported normal communication capabilities, while others were experiencing selective interference that seemed to target specific types of equipment and communication protocols. The pattern suggested that the electronic warfare attack was designed to isolate the American Special Operations Team while leaving other military forces with functional communication capabilities. Dr. Amanda Chen, a civilian contractor who specialized in electronic warfare and communication security, was summoned to the operations center to provide expert analysis of the communication failures. Her preliminary assessment confirmed Williams' diagnosis, but added disturbing details about the sophistication of the electronic warfare being employed against the American team. The jamming signatures suggested equipment that was not widely available and techniques that required extensive training and coordination to implement effectively. Colonel, what we're seeing is consistent with state-of-the-art electronic warfare capabilities, Dr. Chun reported after reviewing the technical data collected during the communication attempts. The jamming is adaptive, responding to our countermeasures in real time and adjusting its parameters to maintain effectiveness against our equipment. This level of sophistication suggests either advanced military opposition or terrorist organizations with access to cutting-edge electronic warfare technology. The tactical picture became increasingly urgent as intelligence assets reported possible hostile movement in the area where the Special Operations Team had last been located. Satellite imagery showed vehicle movement that could indicate enemy forces converging on the team's position, but the lack of direct communication made it impossible to confirm whether the team was in immediate danger or had successfully evaded detection. The uncertainty created a decision-making crisis for Colonel Richardson, who needed to balance the risk of exposing additional American forces against the possibility that the missing team required immediate rescue support. Maria's understanding of the unfolding situation was evident in her subtle changes in behavior and positioning. She adjusted her cleaning schedule to remain within the operations center during the crisis, abandoning her normal routine to ensure that she could observe the command decisions and technical solutions being implemented in response to the emergency. Her presence went unnoticed by the military personnel who were focused entirely on resolving the communication problems and coordinating potential rescue operations. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The emergency reached a critical point when Williams discovered that the electronic jamming was not only preventing outgoing communication, but was also interfering with the navigation and targeting systems that would be essential for any rescue operation. The hostile electronic warfare capabilities were creating a tactical environment where traditional military advantages in communication, navigation, and precision targeting were systematically neutralized, leaving American forces operating under conditions similar to those faced by military units decades earlier, before the development of modern electronic warfare capabilities. Sir, we need to consider that our standard rescue protocols may not be effective in this electronic warfare environment, Williams reported with obvious frustration after exhausting conventional solutions to the communication problems. The jamming is too sophisticated and too well coordinated to overcome with our current equipment and procedures. We may need to develop alternative approaches that don't depend on electronic communication and navigation systems. Colonel Richardson faced the kind of command decision that defined military careers and determined whether American personnel returned home. safely or became casualties of operations that exceeded the capabilities of conventional military responses. The Special Operations Team remained missing and presumably in hostile territory, facing unknown threats with no means of communication or coordination with supporting forces. Traditional rescue operations required precise communication and navigation, capabilities that were being systematically denied by sophisticated electronic warfare. As the crisis deepened and conventional solutions proved inadequate, Maria continued her work with the same professional efficiency that had characterized her performance throughout 18 months of service. But her attention was focused entirely on the technical discussions and tactical planning that would determine the fate of 12 American Special Operations personnel who were depending on military professionals to develop innovative solutions to unprecedented challenges. The stage was set for decisions that would test not only the technical capabilities and tactical expertise of the personnel assembled in the Tactical Operations Center, but also the hidden knowledge and experience that Maria Elena Vasquez had kept carefully concealed behind her civilian appearance and support role. The crisis had created conditions where conventional military expertise was proving insufficient, opening the door for unconventional solutions that might require the kind of specialized knowledge that could only come from someone who had faced similar challenges in the shadowy world of special operations. The communication failures continued to resist all conventional attempts at resolution, leaving Colonel Richardson and his staff with dwindling options and increasing pressure to develop alternative approaches before the missing Special Operations Team faced consequences that could not be reversed through any amount of technical expertise or tactical innovation. The breakthrough came when Staff Sergeant Williams, exhausted from 6 hours of failed attempts to re-establish communication with the missing Special Operations Team, knocked over his coffee cup in frustration, sending scalding liquid across his workstation and onto the floor. Maria appeared instantly with her cleaning supplies, moving with the automatic efficiency that had characterized her response to countless similar incidents over the past 18 months. But as she knelt to clean the spilled coffee, Williams found himself staring at the ID badge clipped to her utility belt, his tired eyes focusing on details that he had never bothered to examine during their brief interactions over the months of shared night shifts. The badge itself was standard issue for civilian personnel with Level 2 security clearance, bearing Maria's photograph and basic identification information in the familiar format used throughout the military installation. But Williams' attention was drawn to a series of small symbols and numbers printed along the bottom edge of the badge, markings that most people would dismiss as routine administrative codes, but which carried specific meaning for personnel familiar with special operations. Identification protocols. The alphanumeric sequence included designations that Williams recognized from his own experience coordinating support for classified missions, codes that indicated specialized training and operational experience far beyond what would be expected from custodial personnel. "Ma'am," Williams said quietly, his voice carrying a tone of careful curiosity rather than direct questioning, "could I see your identification for a moment? There's something I need to verify for security purposes." Maria looked up from her cleaning, her dark eyes meeting Williams' gaze with the kind of steady composure that suggested she had been expecting this moment for some time. Without hesitation, she unclipped her badge and handed it to Williams, her expression remaining neutral but alert. Williams examined the badge with the systematic attention of someone trained to extract maximum information from official documents. The photograph showed Maria's face with the same professional neutrality required for security credentials, but Williams noticed details that he had overlooked during their casual interactions. Her posture in the photograph suggested military bearing, and her eyes carried the kind of focused alertness that characterized personnel who had operated in high-threat environments. The personal information section included a service number that followed patterns used for military personnel rather than civilian employees, though the numbering system was obscure enough that only someone with extensive experience in personnel administration would recognize the significance. The most revealing information appeared in a section of the badge that was printed in font so small that it required close examination to decipher. Williams found himself looking at military occupational specialty codes, security clearance levels, and training certifications that painted a picture of someone whose qualifications far exceeded the requirements for custodial duties at a military installation. The codes indicated completion of advanced combat training, specialized communications instruction, and survival courses that were typically reserved for special operations personnel who might operate behind enemy lines in hostile territory. "Jesus Christ," Williams whispered, his voice barely audible above the ambient noise of the operations center. The badge identified Maria Elena Vasquez, not as a civilian custodial worker, but as a former staff sergeant in the United States Army. With specialized training in combat communications, electronic warfare countermeasures, and mountain warfare operations. Her military occupational specialty was listed as 35N, Signals Intelligence Analyst, with additional qualifications in airborne operations, survival training, and foreign language proficiency. The security clearance level indicated on her badge was far higher than the Level 2 access that she had been using for her custodial duties, suggesting that her current employment represented a significant reduction in her security status and operational responsibilities. Williams' hands trembled slightly as he processed the implications of the information contained on Maria's identification badge. The training certifications and operational qualifications listed in the administrative codes indicated someone who had served with elite military units, possibly including the same special operations community that was currently missing and presumed in danger in Eastern Europe. Her communications training specifically included advanced instruction in electronic warfare, satellite communication systems, and emergency communication, procedures that were directly relevant to the crisis that had been consuming the operations center for the past 6 hours. Colonel Richardson, alerted by Williams' obvious agitation, approached the communication station where Maria continued her cleaning while Williams stared at her identification badge with growing amazement. "Sergeant Williams, what's the issue?" Richardson asked, his tone carrying the authority of a senior officer who expected immediate and accurate information about anything that might affect ongoing operations. "Sir," Williams began, his voice carefully controlled but carrying undertones of excitement and disbelief, "I think we may have been overlooking a significant resource. This woman, Maria Vasquez, her identification indicates extensive special operations training and communications expertise that could be directly relevant to our current situation." Williams handed Maria's badge to Colonel Richardson, who examined it with the practiced eye of someone who had spent decades evaluating personnel qualifications, operational capabilities. Richardson's expression shifted from routine curiosity to sharp attention as he processed the information contained on Maria's identification badge. The military qualifications and training certifications suggested someone who had operated at the highest levels of special operations, with specific expertise in exactly the kind of communication challenges that were currently preventing contact with the missing team. The disconnect between Maria's apparent civilian status and her extensive military background raised questions that demanded immediate answers, but Richardson was experienced enough to recognize that this unexpected discovery might provide solutions to problems that had been proving intractable through conventional approaches. "Staff Sergeant Vasquez," Richardson said, using Maria's military rank for the first time since she had begun working at the facility, "I think we need to have a conversation about your background and current status. Would you please join us for a briefing?" Maria nodded without surprise, her composure suggesting that she had been prepared for this moment throughout her 18 months of carefully maintained anonymity. She secured her cleaning supplies and followed Richardson to a secure briefing room, her bearings subtly shifting from civilian employee to military professional responding to orders from a superior officer. The briefing room was equipped with secure communication systems and classified displays that allowed for discussion of sensitive information without risk of compromise to ongoing operations. Richardson activated the security protocols that ensured their conversation would remain confidential, then turned his attention to Maria with the focused intensity of a commander who needed accurate information to make life-and-death decisions about American personnel in hostile territory. Staff Sergeant, your personnel file indicates civilian employment history, but your identification badge tells a very different story, Richardson began, his tone professional but carrying clear expectations for complete honesty. I need to understand your actual background, your current status, and whether your expertise might be relevant to our current operational challenges. Maria's response revealed the depth of experience and knowledge that she had kept hidden behind her civilian appearance and support role. Sir, I served 8 years in the Army, including 4 years with the 82nd Airborne Division and 4 years with Special Operations Units that I cannot discuss without appropriate authorization, she said, her voice carrying the confidence and precision of someone accustomed to providing briefings to senior military leadership. My separation from active duty was medical, related to injuries sustained during operations in Afghanistan. My current employment represents a personal choice to continue serving the military community while managing ongoing medical limitations that prevent me from returning to active operational status. The medical separation explained Maria's transition from special operations to civilian employment, but it also raised questions about the nature and extent of her injuries and whether they might limit her ability to contribute to the current crisis. Richardson's experience with special operations personnel had taught him that medical separations often resulted from injuries that affected physical capabilities while leaving intellectual and technical expertise intact, creating a situation where highly trained individuals were forced into civilian roles despite possessing knowledge and skills that remained valuable to military operations. What specific expertise do you have that might be relevant to communication failures in an electronic warfare environment? Richardson asked, focusing on the immediate operational requirements rather than the personal circumstances that had led to Maria's current employment situation. Her response demonstrated technical knowledge that far exceeded what her custodial role would suggest, revealing familiarity with advanced communication systems and electronic warfare countermeasures that directly address the challenges currently faced by the Operations Center. Sir, I have extensive training and operational experience with communication systems designed to operate in contested electronic environments, Maria replied, her technical vocabulary and confident delivery indicating deep expertise in exactly the areas where conventional solutions had failed. During my service with Special Operations Units, I participated in multiple missions where hostile electronic warfare required innovative approaches to maintain communication and coordination capabilities. I am familiar with alternative communication methods and technical procedures that may not be currently available to your communication specialists. The revelation of Maria's expertise created immediate possibilities for addressing the communication crisis, but it also raised complex questions about operational security, command authority, and the integration of separated military personnel into active operations. Richardson recognized that Maria's knowledge and experience represented exactly the kind of specialized expertise that the current situation demanded, but utilizing her capabilities would require careful consideration of security protocols, legal limitations, and the potential risks associated with involving someone whose current status was uncertain. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes joined the briefing after being summoned by Richardson, bringing additional expertise in personnel management and operational security that would be essential for evaluating Maria's potential contribution to the ongoing crisis. Hayes reviewed Maria's identification information, and listened to her description of her background and qualifications, asking detailed questions about her training, operational experience, and current medical status that helped clarify both her capabilities and limitations. Staff Sergeant, assuming that your expertise could be valuable in resolving our current communication challenges, what would you need in terms of access, equipment, and support to contribute effectively? Hayes asked, focusing on practical considerations rather than the complex administrative issues that surrounded Maria's unusual situation. Her response demonstrated not only technical knowledge, but also realistic understanding of the operational requirements for special operations support in contested environments. Ma'am, I would need access to technical specifications for the communication equipment currently in use, intelligence assessments of the electronic warfare capabilities being employed against our personnel, and authorization to implement alternative communication procedures that may not conform to standard protocols, Maria replied. Her systematic approach and comprehensive understanding, indicating someone who had faced similar challenges and developed practical solutions based on extensive field experience. The briefing continued for another 30 minutes, during which Maria demonstrated technical knowledge and operational expertise that exceeded the qualifications of most personnel currently assigned to the Operations Center. Her understanding of electronic warfare, alternative communication methods, and special operations requirements was both current and comprehensive, suggesting that she had maintained her professional knowledge and skills despite her transition to civilian employment. Most importantly, her expertise specifically addressed the technical and tactical challenges that had been preventing successful resolution of the communication crisis that Colonel Richardson faced, a decision that required balancing operational necessity against administrative complexity and potential security concerns. The missing Special Operations Team remained in hostile territory without communication, facing unknown threats with no means of coordination with supporting forces. Conventional approaches to resolving the communication problems had failed completely, creating a situation where innovative solutions were not just desirable, but essential for preventing potential catastrophic outcomes. Maria's expertise represented exactly the kind of specialized knowledge that the situation demanded, but utilizing her capabilities would require immediate decisions about access, authority, and operational integration that went far beyond routine personnel management. The stakes could not have been higher, and the window for effective action was closing rapidly as the missing team faced increasing danger with each passing hour of communication failure and isolation. Within 20 minutes of the briefing, Maria found herself seated at the primary communication console that Staff Sergeant Williams had abandoned in frustration hours earlier. The technical manuals and diagnostic equipment that had proven inadequate for resolving the electronic warfare challenges were pushed aside, replaced by Maria's own methodical approach to communication problems that drew upon years of operational experience in contested environments where standard procedures meant death and innovative solutions meant survival. Her fingers moved across the control interfaces with the fluid confidence of someone who had operated similar equipment under far more stressful conditions than the relative safety of the Tactical Operations Center. But Maria's approach differed fundamentally from the systematic troubleshooting that Williams and the other communication specialists had employed throughout the night. Instead of attempting to overpower or circumvent the electronic jamming through brute force technical solutions, Maria began analyzing the interference patterns with the tactical awareness of someone who understood that electronic warfare was ultimately a psychological contest between opposing human intelligences rather than simply a technical challenge. The jamming signatures suggest Russian-manufactured equipment, probably operated by personnel with extensive training in NATO communication protocols, Maria announced after 15 minutes of careful analysis, her voice carrying the authoritative tone of someone providing tactical intelligence to operational commanders. But the implementation patterns indicate that the operators are following standard doctrine too rigidly. They're jamming frequencies in systems that would be priority targets for conventional military units. But special operations teams operating in contested environments typically employ alternative communication methods that wouldn't be obvious to electronic warfare specialists trained on regular Army procedures. Colonel Richardson and Lieutenant Colonel Hayes observed Maria's work with growing respect and amazement, recognizing expertise that exceeded anything they had witnessed from their regular communication staff. Maria's understanding of both the technical aspects of electronic warfare and the tactical psychology of special operations created a unique perspective that addressed the communication crisis from angles that had been overlooked by conventional approaches. Her analysis revealed weaknesses in the hostile jamming that could be exploited by someone who understood how special operations teams actually operated in the field, rather than how they were supposed to operate according to official doctrine. Staff Sergeant Williams' team, call sign Bravo 6, would have been trained on emergency communication procedures that are designed specifically for electronic warfare environments. Maria continued, her analysis becoming more focused as she identified specific technical solutions that addressed the unique challenges faced by the missing personnel. The standard backup frequencies are being jammed, but there are alternative communication methods that require manual implementation and aren't dependent on the automated systems that the hostile forces are targeting. Maria's approach to resolving the communication crisis involved techniques that were not documented in any of the technical manuals available to the Operations Center staff. Her knowledge came from practical experience in hostile environments where communication failures meant isolation, capture, or death, creating strong incentives for developing alternative methods that could function despite sophisticated electronic warfare. The procedures she implemented required manual calibration of equipment, parameters, and utilization of communication protocols that were known only to personnel who had received specialized training in survival communications. The first breakthrough came when Maria succeeded in establishing brief contact with what appeared to be automated emergency beacons that the missing team had deployed according to procedures that were not widely known outside the special operations community. The signals were weak and intermittent, but they provided the first confirmation in 8 hours that at least some members of the team were alive and attempting to communicate with supporting forces. The beacon signals included encoded information about the team's general location and status, though the electronic jamming prevented transmission of detailed intelligence about their tactical situation or immediate requirements. I've got automated distress signals from at least 3 team members, Maria reported with carefully controlled excitement, her professional composure maintained, despite the significance of re-establishing any form of contact with the missing personnel. The signals are consistent with emergency procedures for compromised communication environments. The team is alive and attempting to signal their location, but they're unable to establish voice communication due to the electronic warfare. The confirmation that team members were alive transformed the atmosphere in the Operations Center from desperation to focused determination, but the tactical challenges remained formidable. The electronic jamming continued to prevent detailed communication that would be necessary for coordinating rescue operations or providing tactical support to personnel who might be under immediate threat from hostile forces. Maria's success in detecting the emergency beacons represented crucial progress, but it also revealed the complexity of the tactical situation and the need for more sophisticated solutions to the communication crisis. Maria's next approach involved techniques that were classified at levels requiring special authorization, procedures that she had learned during her service with special operations units, but which were not available to regular military communication specialists. With Colonel Richardson's explicit authorization, she began implementing communication protocols that utilized different technical principles than standard military radio systems. methods that were less susceptible to the electronic warfare techniques being employed against the missing team. The technical procedures were complex and time-consuming, requiring manual configuration of equipment that had been designed for automated operation and utilization of communication frequencies that were not normally allocated for military use. Maria worked with intense concentration, her experience allowing her to adapt standard communication equipment for applications that went far beyond its intended design parameters. The improvised communication system she constructed represented a fusion of technical expertise and tactical innovation that drew upon years of experience in environments where conventional approaches meant failure and death. I'm going to attempt contact using low power burst transmission protocols on frequencies that are outside normal military allocations, Maria explained as she made final adjustments to her improvised communication system. The technique requires precise timing and manual coordination, but it should be less vulnerable to the jamming that's been preventing standard communication attempts. If Bravo 6 is monitoring emergency frequencies according to their training, I should be able to establish brief contact. The tension in the operations center was palpable as Maria began her attempt to re-establish communication with the missing Special Operations Team. Her improvised system operated using principles that were unfamiliar to most of the personnel observing her work, but her confidence and systematic approach inspired cautious optimism among officers who had been facing the possibility of losing American personnel to hostile action in foreign territory. The stakes could not have been higher, and Maria's expertise represented the final opportunity to establish contact before considering more drastic rescue alternatives. The first transmission attempt produced only static and electronic interference, but Maria adjusted her equipment parameters with the patience of someone who understood that communication in contested environments required persistence and incremental improvements rather than immediate success. Her second attempt yielded fragmented signals that might have been voice communication buried within electronic noise, encouraging but insufficient for meaningful information exchange. The third attempt produced clear, unmistakable human voice transmission that electrified everyone in the operations center. Base, this is Bravo 6 Actual, do you copy? The voice of Staff Sergeant Williams crackled through Maria's improvised communication system with crystal clarity, his familiar call sign and professional tone confirming successful contact with the missing team leader. The communication quality was not perfect, but it was more than adequate for coordination of tactical information and rescue planning that had been impossible during the 8 hours of communication failure. Bravo 6, this is Base Actual, we copy you 5 by 5. Colonel Richardson responded immediately, his voice carrying obvious relief and professional satisfaction at the successful reestablishment of contact with personnel who had been presumed lost or captured. Report your status and current tactical situation. The tactical briefing that followed revealed the complexity of the situation faced by the Special Operations Team and validated Maria's analysis of the electronic warfare environment. The team had been operating under electronic jamming for nearly 12 hours, preventing them from communicating with supporting forces while they evaded hostile patrols in mountainous terrain that offered limited concealment and challenging navigation conditions. Their standard communication equipment had been completely ineffective against the sophisticated jamming, forcing them to rely on survival techniques and emergency procedures that had kept them alive but isolated from tactical support. Base, we have been under intermittent contact with hostile forces for the past 6 hours, Williams reported, his transmission providing the first detailed intelligence about the team's tactical situation since the communication crisis had begun. Electronic warfare has prevented communication with higher headquarters, but we have been monitoring emergency frequencies according to survival protocols. Request immediate extraction support and tactical intelligence on hostile forces position in our area of operations. Maria's success in re-establishing communication represented more than technical achievement. It demonstrated expertise and innovation that had solved problems beyond the capabilities of conventional military communication specialists. Her approach had required not only technical knowledge, but also understanding of special operations procedures, electronic warfare, principles, and tactical psychology that came only from extensive operational experience in contested environments. The breakthrough validated her hidden expertise and proved that her years of service with elite military units had provided knowledge and skills that remained valuable despite her transition to civilian employment. The successful communication also revealed the extent of Maria's operational knowledge and her understanding of special operations procedures that were not widely known outside the community of personnel who had served with similar units. Her ability to anticipate the communication methods that the missing team would employ during electronic warfare demonstrated familiarity with survival training and emergency protocols that were specific to elite military units operating in hostile territory. Colonel Richardson coordinated the extraction planning while Maria maintained communication with the missing team, her improvised system providing the reliable information exchange that was essential for coordinating rescue operations. In contested territory, her role had evolved from civilian custodial worker to essential operational asset, utilizing expertise that proved crucial for resolving a crisis that had challenged the capabilities of the entire operations center staff. The transformation was remarkable not only for its technical success, but also for the revelation of Maria's true capabilities and the validation of knowledge and experience that she had kept hidden throughout 18 months of anonymous service in a support role. Her demonstration of specialized expertise had proven that extraordinary capabilities were often concealed behind ordinary appearances, and that the most valuable resources were sometimes overlooked by organizations that failed to recognize the hidden qualifications of their personnel. The ongoing communication with Bravo 6 provided detailed intelligence about the tactical situation and enabled coordination of rescue operations that would have been impossible without Maria's innovative approach to the electronic warfare challenges. Her success represented a triumph of experience and expertise over conventional approaches, proving that specialized knowledge and tactical innovation could overcome technical obstacles that had seemed insurmountable through standard military procedures. The rescue operation's success created a media firestorm that Maria could never have anticipated during her 18 months of anonymous service in the Tactical Operations Center. Within 48 hours of Bravo 6's safe extraction from hostile territory, news outlets across the country were running stories about the mysterious custodial worker who had accomplished what military communications specialists could not, painting her as an unlikely hero who had emerged from obscurity to save American lives through technical expertise and innovative thinking that had proven superior to conventional military approaches. Pentagon officials arrived at Fort Braxton within 72 hours, accompanied by public affairs specialists, career counselors, and senior officers who saw Maria's story as an opportunity to demonstrate the military's commitment to recognizing exceptional performance regardless of an individual's current assignment or apparent status. Brigadier General Patricia Morrison, the senior officer responsible for special operations support across the southeastern United States, personally conducted Maria's debriefing, expressing amazement at the technical innovations and tactical knowledge that had enabled successful communication in an electronic warfare environment that had stymied conventional approaches. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, what you accomplished represents exactly the kind of initiative and expertise that the military needs to recognize and reward, General Morrison announced during a formal meeting that included representatives from multiple agencies and organizations that had become interested in Maria's unique qualifications and demonstrated capabilities. Your technical knowledge and operational experience are clearly being wasted in your current assignment. We have immediate opportunities that would allow you to contribute at a level commensurate with your actual abilities. Preparing and narrating. This type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying this story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The offers began arriving before Maria had fully processed the implications of her sudden transformation from invisible support staff to celebrated military hero. The Defense Intelligence Agency presented opportunities for high-level, technical positions that would utilize her electronic warfare expertise in support of ongoing special operations around the world. The National Security Agency offered consulting contracts that would provide financial compensation far exceeding anything available through military service, along with opportunities to work on classified projects that represented the cutting edge of communication security and electronic warfare countermeasures. Major defense contractors competed for Maria's attention with proposals that seemed designed to address every possible career aspiration and financial concern. Lockheed Martin offered a senior technical position with starting compensation exceeding $150,000 annually, plus relocation assistance, comprehensive benefits, and opportunities for professional development that would expand her expertise in emerging technologies related to military communication and electronic warfare. Raytheon proposed a consulting arrangement that would allow her to work part-time while maintaining her current residence, providing flexibility and independence, while contributing to projects that would influence the future of military communication capabilities. The media attention was equally overwhelming, with television networks competing for exclusive interviews that would tell Maria's story to audiences fascinated by narratives of ordinary people accomplishing extraordinary things through hidden expertise and quiet dedication. CNN offered to fly her to Atlanta for a primetime interview that would reach millions of viewers and establish her as a national figure representing the unrecognized potential that existed within military support personnel. Fox News proposed a documentary feature that would explore her background and demonstrate how her service had prepared her for the moment when her expertise became essential for saving American lives in hostile territory. Publishers approached Maria with proposals for book deals that would transform her story into inspirational literature for audiences seeking examples of individuals who had overcome adversity through persistence and professional excellence. The proposed titles reflected the dramatic nature of her emergence from anonymity, Hidden in Plain Sight, How a Janitor Saved American Lives, The Ghost in the Machine, A Military Hero's Secret Service, and From Mopped to Mission, An Unlikely Military Hero's Journey. The financial terms were substantial, with advance payments that would provide immediate financial security and royalty arrangements that could generate long-term income from her story. Speaking engagements offered another avenue for recognition and compensation, with military academies, defense conferences, and corporate leadership seminars requesting presentations that would share Maria's insights about innovation, hidden potential, and the importance of recognizing expertise regardless of its packaging. The United States Military Academy at West Point extended a formal invitation for Maria to address cadets about leadership under pressure and the value of diverse perspectives in solving complex tactical problems. The Association of the United States Army offered a keynote speaking opportunity at their annual conference, with an honorarium that exceeded Maria's current annual salary. Social media amplified the attention exponentially, with hashtags like #HiddenHero and #JanitorToHero trending across multiple platforms as users shared Maria's story and celebrated her transformation from overlooked support staff to recognized military expert. Military personnel from around the world posted messages of support and admiration, describing their own experiences with hidden expertise and unrecognized potential within military organizations. The viral nature of her story created opportunities for endorsement deals, product sponsorships, and commercial partnerships that could provide ongoing revenue. streams based on her newfound celebrity status, the pressure to capitalize on her moment of fame came from multiple directions, with well-meaning advisors emphasizing the temporary nature of media attention and the importance of securing long-term benefits, while public interest remained high. Career counselors pointed out that opportunities like those currently available to Maria were rare and might never appear again, making immediate action essential for maximizing the professional and financial advantages of her unexpected recognition. Family members and friends expressed excitement about her prospects and encouraged her to embrace opportunities that would provide security and recognition that had been denied during her years of anonymous service. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, who had become something of a mentor figure during the crisis, offered advice that reflected both professional experience and personal concern for Maria's future. This kind of recognition is extraordinary, but it's also fragile, Hayes explained during a private conversation about Maria's options and opportunities. Media attention fades quickly, and the institutional memory of exceptional performance can be surprisingly short. If you want to make lasting changes in your career and financial situation, now is the time to act decisively. The weight of expectations from multiple constituencies created pressure that was as intense as any tactical situation Maria had faced during her operational service. Military leaders wanted her to accept positions that would utilize her expertise for ongoing national security requirements. Media representatives wanted her to share her story in ways that would inspire audiences and generate revenue for their organizations. Publishers wanted her to transform her experience into commercial literature that would appeal to readers seeking inspirational narratives about overcoming adversity and achieving recognition through hidden talents. Colonel Richardson, whose own career had been enhanced by the successful resolution of the communication crisis, encouraged Maria to consider opportunities that would advance her professional standing within the military community. You've proven yourself at the highest levels, and you deserve recognition and compensation that reflects your actual capabilities, Richardson argued during discussions about Maria's future options. Remaining in your current position would be a waste of expertise that could contribute to national security and your own professional development. The most compelling offers came from organizations that promised to utilize Maria's expertise for missions that would continue to save American lives and contribute to national security objectives around the world. The Special Operations Command offered a civilian position that would involve developing communication procedures and training protocols based on her innovative approaches to electronic warfare challenges. The position would provide both professional satisfaction and financial compensation that reflected the value of her unique qualifications and demonstrated capabilities. Defense contractors emphasized the cutting-edge nature of the projects they would offer, work that represented the future of military communication and electronic warfare capabilities. The opportunity to influence technology development and training procedures appealed to Maria's professional interests and provided a sense of purpose that extended beyond personal recognition or financial gain. The positions offered intellectual challenges and professional growth opportunities that would expand her expertise while contributing to military capabilities that could affect the safety and effectiveness of American forces around the world. International opportunities added another dimension to the choices available to Maria, with allied nations and NATO organizations expressing interest in her expertise and innovative approaches to communication challenges in contested environments. The United Kingdom's Ministry of Defense offered a consulting position that would involve training British Special Forces in alternative communication methods, while the Royal Australian Air Force proposed a technical advisor role that would contribute to the development of communication systems designed to operate in Asia-Pacific environments where electronic warfare capabilities were becoming increasingly sophisticated. The personal impact of sudden fame was disorienting for someone who had spent 18 months perfecting the art of being invisible and unnoticed. Strangers recognized her in restaurants and shopping centers, requesting photographs and expressing gratitude for her service that exceeded anything she had experienced during her active military career. The attention was flattering but overwhelming, creating a sense of disconnection from the quiet, purposeful life she had built around her work at the Tactical Operations Center. Security concerns added complexity to her daily routine, with military police advisors recommending precautions that reflected the possibility that hostile intelligence services might target someone whose expertise had proven effective against sophisticated electronic warfare capabilities. The simple freedom of movement that had characterized her civilian life was replaced by awareness of potential threats and the need for precautions that reminded her of the operational security requirements she had faced during her special operations service. The most difficult aspect of the sudden attention was the pressure to make immediate decisions about opportunities that would determine the direction of her life for years to come. The window for capitalizing on media attention was limited, but the implications of her choices would extend far beyond the current period of recognition and celebrity. Maria found herself facing the same kind of high-stakes decision-making that had characterized her military service, but with personal rather than tactical consequences that would affect not just her own future, but her ability to continue serving in ways that aligned with her values and professional priorities. 3 days after the media circus reached its peak intensity, Maria made a decision that shocked everyone who had been competing for her attention and expertise. She requested a private meeting with General Morrison, Colonel Richardson, and Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, declining the presence of public affairs specialists, career counselors, and media representatives who had been orchestrating her transformation. From anonymous custodial worker to celebrated military hero, the meeting took place in the same secure briefing room where her expertise had first been revealed, a setting that emphasized the serious nature of the decision she was about to announce. "General, Colonel, Lieutenant Colonel," Maria began, her voice carrying the same calm professionalism that had characterized her performance during the communication crisis. "I appreciate everything that has been offered to me over the past few days. The opportunities are extraordinary, and I understand that many people would consider me foolish for not accepting them immediately. But I've given careful consideration to what I actually want to accomplish with the remainder of my career, and I believe there's a better way for me to serve than pursuing fame, fortune, or high-profile positions that would take me away from the work that I find most meaningful." General Morrison leaned forward with obvious curiosity and concern, recognizing that Maria's tone suggested a decision that would disappoint the various organizations and individuals who had invested time and resources in courting her talents. "Staff Sergeant, I hope you understand that opportunities like these are rare and may not be available if you change your mind in the future. The military and defense community have short memories for individual achievements, and media attention has an even briefer lifespan. Whatever you're considering, I encourage you to think about your long-term interests and financial security." Maria smiled with genuine warmth but unwavering determination, her expression indicating that she had thoroughly considered the implications of her decision and was prepared to accept the consequences of choosing a path that others might not understand. "Ma'am, I've spent the past 3 days thinking about what motivated me to maintain that communication equipment for 18 months, what drove me to keep my father's repair techniques alive through daily practice, and what made me feel most fulfilled during my years of military service. The answer isn't recognition, money, or career advancement. It's the quiet satisfaction of keeping essential systems operational so that other people can accomplish their missions safely and effectively." Colonel Richardson recognized the conviction in Maria's voice and the certainty of her decision, but his experience with personnel management compelled him to ensure that she fully understood the magnitude of what she was declining. "Maria, we're talking about opportunities that could set you up financially for life. positions that would utilize your expertise at the highest levels of government and defense, and recognition that would establish you as a leader in your field. Are you certain that you want to walk away from all of that, to return to a support role that most people would consider beneath your qualifications? The question struck at the heart of Maria's decision and provided her with an opportunity to explain the values and priorities that had guided her throughout her military career and civilian employment. Sir, I've learned that the most important work is often the work that nobody notices until it fails. The communication equipment that enabled me to contact Bravo 6 had been maintained and calibrated by dozens of technicians, whose names will never appear in news reports or recommendation letters. The backup systems that provided alternative communication paths were designed by engineers who will never receive recognition for their contributions to that successful rescue operation. Maria paused, gathering her thoughts to articulate a philosophy that had been developing throughout her years of service, but had crystallized during the intense pressure of the past few days. I want to return to that kind of essential, invisible work, but I want to do it in a way that utilizes what I've learned and helps other people develop the expertise that might be needed in future crisis situations. I don't want to be the hero who gets called in when conventional approaches fail. I want to be the person who ensures that conventional approaches are sophisticated enough to handle the challenges that special operations forces actually face in hostile environments. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, who had observed Maria's performance throughout the crisis and understood her technical capabilities better than anyone else in the room, asked the question that addressed the practical implications of Maria's decision. What specifically are you proposing? How do you envision contributing to military operations, while declining the high-profile opportunities that would utilize your expertise most directly? Maria's response revealed that her decision was not simply a rejection of fame and fortune, but a carefully considered alternative that would allow her to contribute more effectively to military operations while maintaining the anonymity and focus that she valued. I'm requesting reassignment to a technical training position, where I can develop curriculum and procedures that will prepare regular communication specialists to handle electronic warfare challenges using the same innovative approaches that proved effective during the recent crisis. Instead of being the one person who knows how to solve these problems, I want to be the person who ensures that hundreds of communication specialists have the knowledge and skills to develop their own solutions. The proposal demonstrated Maria's understanding of military organizations and her recognition that individual expertise, however exceptional, was less valuable than systematic capability development that could benefit multiple units and operations. Her approach reflected military philosophy that emphasized building institutional capabilities rather than depending on individual heroes, but it also revealed her personal preference for working behind the scenes to enable other people's success. Rather than seeking recognition for her own achievements, General Morrison considered Maria's proposal with the strategic perspective of someone responsible for special operations, support across multiple commands and operational theaters. What you're describing would be valuable, but it would also represent a significant underutilization of your demonstrated capabilities. The military needs people who can solve problems that exceed conventional expertise, not just people who can teach conventional approaches to unconventional problems. Maria's response addressed the general's concern while maintaining her commitment to the approach that aligned with her values and professional priorities. Ma'am, what happened during the communication crisis wasn't exceptional individual performance. It was the application of systematic knowledge and procedures that I learned from multiple instructors and operational experiences over many years of service. The techniques I used can be taught to other people, and the analytical approaches I employed can be systematized and incorporated into standard training programs. My goal is to ensure that the next communication crisis doesn't require someone with my specific background to resolve. The military leaders recognized the wisdom in Maria's approach, but they also understood the practical challenges of implementing systematic capability development in organizations that were often focused on immediate operational requirements rather than long-term institutional development. Colonel Richardson asked about the specific details of Maria's proposal, seeking to understand how her vision could be translated into concrete programs and procedures that would enhance military communication capabilities across multiple units and commands. I'm proposing a partnership between the Tactical Operations Center and the Military Communication Training Facilities at Fort Gordon, Maria explained, her systematic approach reflecting the same analytical thinking that had enabled her to solve the electronic warfare challenges. I would divide my time between practical maintenance work that keeps me current with operational systems and development of training materials that would prepare communication specialists for the kind of sophisticated electronic warfare that we encountered during the recent crisis. Her proposal included specific recommendations for curriculum development, hands-on training exercises, and evaluation procedures that would ensure communication specialists could adapt to electronic warfare environments using innovative approaches rather than simply following predetermined protocols. The program would emphasize creative problem-solving, technical improvisation, and a kind of tactical thinking that had enabled Maria to succeed where conventional approaches had failed. The most compelling aspect of Maria's proposal was her insistence on maintaining her current position at the Tactical Operations Center while taking on additional training responsibilities, ensuring that her institutional knowledge remained connected to operational realities, rather than becoming isolated in academic or theoretical environments. She understood that effective training required ongoing exposure to real-world challenges and continuous updating, based on evolving threats and technological developments. I want to continue working night shifts in the operations center, maintaining the communication equipment and observing actual operations, while spending my days developing training materials and conducting specialized instruction for communication specialists who might face similar challenges in future deployments, Maria explained. This approach would allow me to remain current with operational requirements while contributing to institutional capability development that could benefit multiple units and future operations. The decision disappointed media representatives, defense contractors, and publishers who had invested time and resources in courting Maria's participation in high-profile opportunities, but it impressed the military leadership who recognized the wisdom and selflessness of her choice. General Morrison expressed respect for Maria's decision while ensuring that the military would support her proposed alternative approach to utilizing her expertise. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, your decision represents exactly the kind of institutional thinking that the military needs more of, General Morrison concluded. We'll work with Fort Gordon and the Special Operations Command to develop the training partnership you've proposed, and we'll ensure that you have the resources and authority necessary to implement programs that will enhance communication capabilities across multiple units. The media reaction to Maria's decision was initially confused and disappointed, as reporters and producers who had invested in her story struggled to understand why someone would decline opportunities that millions of people would consider life-changing. But as the implications of her choice became clear, her decision was increasingly portrayed as an example of service-oriented values that transcended personal ambition and material gain. Maria's choice resonated particularly strongly with military personnel who understood the value of essential, unrecognized work that enabled mission success without generating headlines or recognition. Her decision to remain in a support role while contributing to institutional capability development was seen as exemplifying the military values of service before self and commitment to mission, accomplishment over personal advancement. The transformation in how Maria was perceived within the Tactical Operations Center was immediate and profound. Personnel who had previously viewed her as invisible support staff now recognized her as a professional whose expertise and dedication had proven essential. during a crisis that had challenged the entire organization. But rather than creating distance or awkwardness, the recognition enhanced the respect and collegiality that characterized her interactions with military personnel at all levels. Her decision had proven that the most extraordinary contributions often came from people who chose purpose over praise, service over recognition, and institutional improvement over personal advancement. Maria Elena Vasquez had demonstrated that true leadership sometimes meant declining opportunities for individual success in favor of approaches that would benefit broader communities and long-term organizational capabilities. 6 months after declining the high-profile opportunities that would have made her wealthy and famous, Maria's training program at Fort Gordon had become the most requested specialization course in the military communication field, with waiting lists that extended 8 months and recommendations from commanding officers who had witnessed the enhanced capabilities of personnel who completed her instruction. The course she developed, officially designated Advanced Communication in Contested Environments, had already graduated 312 students who were now deployed with Special Operations Units, conventional forces, and international peacekeeping missions around the world. The success stories began arriving within weeks of the first graduates reaching their operational assignments. Technical Sergeant David Park, who had completed Maria's course in the second class, successfully maintained communication for a Marine reconnaissance team operating in Somalia when conventional systems failed due to atmospheric interference that mimicked the electronic warfare conditions Maria had trained him to overcome. His innovative use of improvised antenna configurations and alternative frequency selection enabled extraction of wounded personnel who would have been stranded without reliable communication support. Specialist Jennifer Walsh applied Maria's troubleshooting methodologies during the humanitarian crisis in the Philippines, where natural disaster damage to communication infrastructure required creative solutions that combined military communication equipment with civilian resources in ways that had never been attempted by relief organizations. Her ability to establish communication networks that connected international aid workers with military logistics coordinators dramatically improved the efficiency of disaster response operations and saved lives that would have been lost to coordination failures and resource allocation delays. The most significant validation of Maria's approach came during a joint NATO exercise in Eastern Europe, where electronic warfare scenarios designed to test alliance communication capabilities were overcome by American personnel using techniques that Maria had incorporated into standard training curricula. Colonel James Mitchell, the exercise director, reported that communication resilience had improved by over 60% compared to previous exercises, with American forces maintaining operational coordination despite electronic warfare that had historically disrupted NATO operations and created dangerous gaps in tactical awareness. Maria's influence extended beyond individual success stories to systematic changes in military communication doctrine and equipment procurement decisions that reflected her emphasis on adaptability and innovative problem-solving rather than dependence on standardized procedures and automated systems. The Defense Communications Agency incorporated her training methodologies into basic communication courses, ensuring that thousands of military personnel would receive instruction in the flexible thinking and technical improvisation that had proven essential during electronic warfare encounters. International military organizations requested access to Maria's training materials and instructional methods, recognizing that electronic warfare capabilities were proliferating globally, and that traditional communication approaches were becoming inadequate for modern operational environments. The Royal Canadian Air Force sent instructors to observe Maria's teaching methods and adapt them for Canadian personnel, while the Australian Defence Force negotiated formal training exchanges that would allow their communication specialists to attend her courses at Fort Gordon. The ripple effects of Maria's decision reached unexpected civilian applications when emergency management organizations recognized that her communication techniques could enhance disaster response capabilities. In situations where standard infrastructure had been damaged or destroyed, the Federal Emergency Management Agency incorporated modified versions of her training materials into their communication specialist certification programs, improving the ability of civilian emergency responders to maintain coordination during natural disasters and terrorist incidents that disrupted normal communication systems. Dr. Sarah Chun, a telecommunications researcher at MIT, published academic papers based on Maria's methodologies that influenced commercial communication system design and contributed to the development of consumer electronics that were more resilient to interference and technical failures. The crossover from military applications to civilian technology demonstrated that Maria's innovations had implications far beyond their original operational context, potentially benefiting millions of people who would never know that they're improved. Communication capabilities originated from techniques developed by a former custodial worker. Educational institutions began incorporating Maria's story into leadership courses and military history curricula, using her decision to decline fame and fortune as an example of service-oriented values that prioritized institutional improvement over personal advancement. The United States Air Force Academy developed a case study based on her career that was used to teach cadets about the importance of recognizing expertise, regardless of its packaging, and the value of systematic capability development over individual heroics. Maria's influence on individual careers was particularly evident among young military personnel, who saw her example as proof that expertise and dedication were more valuable than rank, position, or recognition. Airman First Class Michael Torres, inspired by Maria's story, volunteered for additional technical training and developed innovative maintenance procedures that improved aircraft availability rates at his base in Japan. His commanding officer noted that Torres frequently cited Maria's example when explaining his motivation for pursuing excellence in routine technical work that rarely received recognition or praise. The training program she established became a model for other military specializations that recognized the need for systematic capability development rather than dependence on individual expertise. The Special Operations Command adapted her methodologies for training programs in explosive ordnance disposal, intelligence analysis, and combat medicine, creating institutional capabilities that reduce dependence on exceptional individuals, while improving overall performance across multiple operational areas. Maria's continued work at the Kanpava Tactical Operations Center provided ongoing validation of her training methods and ensured that her instruction remained current with evolving threats and technological developments. Her dual role as operational technician and training developer created a feedback loop that constantly improved both her teaching and the practical application of her techniques in real-world situations. Personnel who worked with her at Fort Braxton observed that her expertise continued to deepen despite her decision to remain in a support role, demonstrating that professional growth was possible without pursuing traditional career advancement. The most profound impact of Maria's choice was its influence on military culture and organizational attitudes toward recognizing and utilizing hidden expertise within existing personnel. Her story prompted systematic reviews of personnel assignments and qualifications that identified dozens of military members whose skills and experience were being underutilized due to administrative oversights, career field limitations, or assumptions about the relationship between current assignments and actual capabilities. Master Sergeant Lisa Rodriguez, inspired by Maria's example, revealed her extensive background in computer programming and cybersecurity that had been overlooked during routine personnel assignments, leading to her reassignment to a critical cybersecurity position where her expertise contributed to protecting military networks from sophisticated cyber attacks. Her story, along with similar revelations from other personnel, demonstrated that Maria's impact extended beyond communication, training to broader recognition of the need for organizations to better understand and utilize the full range of capabilities possessed by their people. Civilian organizations began adopting Maria's approach to professional development, recognizing that her emphasis on systematic capability building and institutional knowledge transfer could benefit corporate training programs and professional development initiatives. Major consulting firms incorporated her methodologies into leadership development programs, while technology companies used her example to justify investments in employee training that might not generate immediate returns but would build long-term organizational capabilities. The academic community embraced Maria's story as a case study in servant leadership and organizational effectiveness, with business schools using her decision as an example of how individual choices could create institutional change that exceeded the impact of traditional leadership approaches. Her rejection of personal advancement in favor of systematic capability development challenged conventional assumptions about career success and demonstrated alternative definitions of professional achievement that emphasized contribution over recognition. International development organizations applied Maria's training principles to communication challenges in regions where infrastructure limitations and security threats created conditions similar to electronic warfare environments. Her techniques for improvising communication solutions using available resources proved valuable for humanitarian operations in conflict zones where standard communication equipment was inadequate or unavailable, potentially saving lives and improving the effectiveness of international aid efforts. The most unexpected application of Maria's influence came through veterans organizations that used her story to encourage former military personnel to share their expertise with civilian communities through volunteer training programs and consulting services. Her example demonstrated that military skills and knowledge could contribute to civilian organizations in ways that created mutual benefit while maintaining the service orientation that characterized military values. Technology companies began recruiting military communications specialists who had completed Maria's training program, recognizing that their expertise in adaptive problem-solving and innovative technical approaches could contribute to commercial product development and corporate problem-solving initiatives. The demand for personnel with her training exceeded supply, creating career opportunities for military communication specialists that validated the value of the capabilities she had developed. Maria's impact on military families was particularly significant, as her story provided inspiration for military spouses and children who faced their own challenges related to recognition, career development, and finding meaningful ways to contribute to their communities. Her example demonstrated that extraordinary contributions could come from ordinary circumstances and that service to others could be more fulfilling than personal advancement or material success. The long-term implications of Maria's choice continued to unfold as her training graduates reached senior positions where they could influence military communication policy and procedure development on a larger scale. Technical Sergeant Park, who had successfully applied her techniques during his deployment in Somalia, was promoted to a training position where he could pass her methodologies to additional personnel, creating a multiplier effect that exponentially expanded her influence across military communication communities. The measurement of Maria's impact became a subject of academic study and military assessment, with researchers attempting to quantify the operational improvements and cost savings that resulted from her training program and the systematic capability development it represented. Preliminary studies suggested that her approach had generated benefits worth millions of dollars in improved operational effectiveness and reduced equipment replacement costs. Though Maria herself remained focused on the individual success stories and personal development achievements of the personnel she had trained, her satisfaction with the choice she had made was evident in her continued enthusiasm for both her operational duties at the Tactical Operations Center and her training responsibilities at Fort Gordon, demonstrating that professional fulfillment could come from service to others rather than personal recognition or financial gain. Maria Elena Vasquez had proven that the most significant leadership contributions sometimes came from people who chose to remain in supporting roles while building capabilities that would benefit countless others for years to come. 5 years after the night that changed everything, Maria Elena Vasquez arrived for her shift at the Tactical Operations Center with the same quiet precision that had characterized her work since returning to Fort Braxton. But the world around her had transformed in ways that exceeded even her most optimistic expectations about the impact of systematic capability development and institutional knowledge transfer. The communication equipment that she maintained with the same meticulous attention to detail now incorporated design improvements that had been inspired by her training methodologies, while the personnel operating these systems possessed skills and analytical approaches that reflected the influence of hundreds of graduates from her advanced communication program. The most remarkable change was visible in the confidence and competence of young communication specialists who arrived at their first operational assignments, already equipped with the flexible thinking and technical improvisation skills that had once been available only to elite special operations personnel with years of field experience. Airman First Class Rebecca Martinez, no relation despite the shared surname, demonstrated troubleshooting approaches during routine equipment maintenance that would have impressed senior technicians from previous generations. Her systematic methodology and creative problem-solving reflecting the influence of training curricula that Maria had developed based on her own operational experiences. Colonel Richardson, now promoted to Brigadier General and serving as the senior commander for Special Operations support across the southeastern United States, often remarked to visiting officials that the communication capabilities of contemporary military units exceeded anything he had witnessed during his decades of service, with reliability and adaptability that had transformed the tactical possibilities available to commanders operating in contested environments around the world. His assessment was supported by operational data that documented dramatic improvements in mission success rates, personnel safety outcomes, and international cooperation effectiveness that could be traced directly to enhanced communication capabilities. Training facility at Fort Gordon had evolved into a center of excellence that attracted international students, civilian researchers, and technology industry representatives who recognized that Maria's methodologies had implications extending far beyond military applications. The Advanced Communication in Contested Environments program had spawned specialized courses in improvised antenna design, frequency management under interference conditions, and collaborative problem-solving techniques that were being adapted for emergency management. International development work and commercial technology applications. Dr. Elena Petrov, a communications researcher from MIT who had spent 6 months studying Maria's training methods, published findings that documented the systematic advantages of educational approaches that emphasized adaptability and creative thinking over memorization and standardized procedures. Her research demonstrated that personnel trained using Maria's methodology showed superior performance across multiple technical disciplines, suggesting that the cognitive skills developed through her program had applications beyond communication systems to engineering, logistics, and analytical work that required innovative approaches to complex problems. The international impact of Maria's influence became evident through NATO exercises and joint operations where American communication personnel consistently demonstrated superior performance in electronic warfare environments, leading Allied nations to request access to training materials and instructional methods that had given American forces significant operational advantages. The British Ministry of Defense established a formal partnership that allowed their personnel to attend courses at Fort Gordon, While the Canadian Armed Forces incorporated modified versions of Maria's curricula into their basic communication training programs, technology companies had begun recruiting military communication specialists, specifically because of their training in adaptive problem-solving and innovative technical approaches, recognizing that these skills translated directly to civilian applications in telecommunications, software development, and systems engineering. The demand for personnel with this background had created career opportunities that provided financial incentives for military service while ensuring that the capabilities Maria had developed continued to benefit both military and civilian organizations. Most profound validation of Maria's approach came through crisis situations where her training graduates had prevented potential disasters through creative applications of communication techniques in circumstances that exceeded the parameters of any training scenario. Master Sergeant Jennifer Walsh, now serving as a training instructor herself, had successfully coordinated evacuation operations during a terrorist attack in West Africa by establishing communication networks that connected civilian authorities, military forces, and international aid organizations using improvised equipment and innovative frequency management that had been impossible before her exposure to Maria's methodologies. The academic community had embraced Maria's story as a defining example of servant leadership and institutional innovation, with business schools, military academies, and public administration programs using her career as a case study in how individual decisions could create systemic change that exceeded the impact of traditional leadership approaches. Harvard Business School developed a comprehensive analysis of her choice that was used to teach students about the relationship between personal values and organizational effectiveness, while the Army War College incorporated her example into strategic leadership courses that prepared senior officers for institutional transformation responsibilities. Maria's influence on military culture was perhaps most evident in changed attitudes toward recognizing and utilizing hidden expertise within existing personnel, with systematic reviews of assignments and qualifications becoming standard practice across multiple service branches. The Department of Defense had implemented policies that required regular assessment of personnel capabilities beyond their current job descriptions, leading to identification and utilization of skills and experience that had previously been overlooked. Due to administrative assumptions and career field limitations, the personal satisfaction that Maria derived from her choice was evident in her continued enthusiasm for both operational duties and training responsibilities, though she had consistently declined requests for promotion to positions that would have removed her from direct technical work and student interaction. Her personnel evaluations consistently rated her performance as exceptional, but her supervisors had learned to respect her preference for remaining in roles that allowed her to maintain hands-on involvement with equipment, maintenance, and face-to-face instruction rather than advancing to administrative positions that would have provided higher rank and greater recognition. The evening ritual that had characterized Maria's approach to her work remained unchanged, with the same systematic preparation and methodical attention to detail that had defined her service throughout the transformation from anonymous custodial worker to influential training developer. But the equipment she maintained now incorporated technological improvements that had been inspired by her innovations, while the personnel operating these systems possessed capabilities that reflected the systematic knowledge transfer she had championed over individual recognition and career advancement. Young military personnel continued to seek her guidance and mentorship, drawn by her reputation for technical expertise and her commitment to developing other people's capabilities, rather than promoting her own achievements. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, who had been inspired by Maria's example to pursue additional technical training, now served as an instructor in her program while maintaining his operational duties, demonstrating the sustainability of her approach to professional development and institutional Capability building. The communication crisis that had revealed Maria's hidden expertise had become a standard case study in military education. But the focus had shifted from the dramatic rescue operation to the systematic improvements in training and capability development that had prevented similar crises from occurring in subsequent operations. Military communication failures that had once required exceptional individual expertise to resolve were now handled routinely by personnel who possessed the skills and analytical approaches that Maria had systematized and incorporated into standard training curricula. International recognition of her contributions had led to speaking invitations from organizations around the world, but Maria had consistently declined opportunities that would have taken her away from her operational duties and training responsibilities for extended periods. Her preference for remaining close to the practical application of her expertise reflected the same values that had led her to decline fame and fortune in favor of institutional contribution and systematic capability development. The most meaningful recognition came from the personnel she had trained, whose success in operational assignments provided ongoing validation of her methodologies and confirmation that her decision to prioritize teaching over personal advancement had generated benefits that exceeded anything she could have accomplished through individual achievement. The letters of appreciation and progress reports from her graduates created a record of impact that was more valuable to Maria than any official awards or public recognition she might have received. Technology improvements inspired by Maria's innovations had begun appearing in civilian communication systems, with consumer electronics incorporating design features that enhanced reliability and user adaptability in ways that benefited millions of people who would never know that their improved communication capabilities originated from techniques developed by a military training instructor. The crossover from military to civilian applications demonstrated the broad relevance of her approach to problem solving and system design, validating her belief that effective solutions often had applications beyond their original context. Transformation of military communication capabilities had influenced international relations and diplomatic initiatives, with improved coordination capabilities enabling more effective peacekeeping operations, humanitarian assistance programs, and multinational security cooperation that contributed to global stability and conflict prevention. Maria's decision to focus on systematic capability development rather than individual recognition had generated strategic advantages that extended far beyond the military organizations where her influence was most directly evident. The legacy of her choice continued to evolve as her training graduates reached senior positions where they could influence policy development and institutional priorities on an even larger scale, creating a multiplier effect that exponentially expanded her impact across military and civilian organizations worldwide. The principles she had championed, systematic knowledge transfer, institutional capability building, and service-oriented leadership, had become embedded in organizational cultures that would continue to benefit from her contributions long after her own career had concluded. Maria Elena Vasquez had proven that the most significant leadership contributions sometimes came from people who chose to remain in supporting roles while building capabilities that would benefit countless others for generations to come. Her story demonstrated that true heroism was not measured by recognition or reward, but by the willingness to serve others through quiet dedication to work that enabled their success and safety. As she continued her nightly routine of equipment maintenance and system monitoring, Maria carried the satisfaction of knowing that her decision had created lasting change that exceeded anything she could have accomplished through individual achievement. The communication systems humming around her were operated by personnel whose capabilities reflected her influence, while training programs around the world continued to develop new generations of specialists who would carry her methodologies forward into challenges not yet imagined. The ghost of maintenance sector had become something far more valuable than a celebrated hero. She had become a teacher, a leader, and a quiet force for institutional improvement whose impact would be measured not in headlines or recognition, but in the enhanced capabilities and improved safety of military personnel serving around the world. Maria Elena Vasquez had chosen purpose over praise, service over recognition, and institutional contribution over personal advancement, proving that the most extraordinary legacies are often built by ordinary people who understand that the most important work is the work that enables others to succeed. 10 years later, Maria was training her final class before retirement when a young airman approached her after the session. "Ma'am, I have to ask, do you ever regret not taking those big offers? The fame, the money, all of it?" Maria smiled, looking around the classroom where her students were practicing the communication techniques that had now become standard across the entire military. On the wall hung photographs of over 2,000 graduates who had completed her program, many now training others themselves, creating an endless chain of knowledge and capability that stretched across every continent. "You know what I regret?" she said quietly. "I regret that it took 18 months for someone to look closely enough at my ID badge to see who I really was. How many other people are out there right now, quietly doing essential work, carrying expertise that nobody recognizes because we're not paying attention?" The airman nodded thoughtfully. "So the real lesson isn't about you at all." "Exactly," Maria replied. "The real lesson is that extraordinary people are everywhere, in cafeterias, maintenance shops, supply rooms, driving trucks, answering phones. They're the ones who show up every day, do the work that matters, and keep the world running while waiting for someone to notice that they have more to give." She gathered her training materials one last time. The heroes aren't always the ones in the spotlight. Sometimes they're the ones holding the flashlight. If Maria's story moved you, you're not alone. Every day, there are hidden heroes in our communities, people whose quiet dedication and unrecognized expertise make extraordinary things possible. Subscribe to our channel to discover more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. These are the stories that remind us to look closer, listen better, and recognize the incredible potential that surrounds us every single day. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of people who believe that the most important heroes are often the ones nobody sees coming. What hidden hero will we uncover next?